Jason Priester's here from the Clemson Insider. Jason, how's it going?
It's going, man. How about yourself?
It's going pretty well. You've had an active couple of weeks with this Clemson football team.
Absolutely, man. It's kind of been a train wreck that I don't think anybody saw coming. This offense that was hyped up all throughout the summer, all throughout fall camp, just can't seem to get out of its own way. They kind of found a little bit of something in the second half Saturday against Troy, but it's against Troy. We'll see what happens when they head off to Atlanta for their first ACC game on Saturday, because, that's a big one. You drop that and your season might be over almost as quickly as it got started.
No, it's a good point. You probably heard me mention to Anthony that most of the talk nationally throughout the offseason has been Clemson, Penn State, Texas. They seem to be the three odds-on favorites, but right out of the gate, a loss to LSU. Now, that doesn't shock anyone, but Clemson was a pretty decent favorite in the game and jumped out to a lead and got outscored 14-0 in the second half. And then this Troy game, that's one of those that your average college football fan is, of course, checking off, and they're watching all the bigger games. And then you see 16-0, and people are jumping out of their chair, including me. The first score I saw was 16-3, and I was like, what is going on there? I got to check this out.
It was very surreal. It was hard to watch. Troy hit a big play on their very first possession. I think it was like a 45-yard touchdown where they ended up getting probably their fastest wide receiver matched up on a linebacker. That's where you got to call a kind of timeout or something there. That's a total mismatch. Coaches missed it, and later on you get a pick six on the 4-yard line that gets tipped in the air. But the biggest story has kind of been Clemson's offense. I don't think anybody was shocked that LSU went in there and beat Clemson, but it was how inept that offense was, man. That offensive line that was supposed to be probably the best Dabo's had since he's been there, just has not performed up to that level. They've had a lot of problems up front. Cade Klubnik all of a sudden looks like a sophomore the way he did as he was during his first year as the starter. They've got a lot of issues, man, and this is kind of similar to that 2016 team that kind of flirted with a lot of losses, played Troy. Troy played them real tight in week 2. But I don't know that this team's capable of flipping the switch the way that team was.
Yeah, it's a good point. And as you mentioned, Georgia Tech in the opener, before we get to the Georgia Tech game in particular, the rivalry here, I think, is one that's missed by a lot of people outside of those couple states, because that was obviously the crossover game for Clemson when they were in the other division. They matched them up against Georgia Tech, and a lot of people don't realize that this is a long-standing rivalry.
Absolutely, and one that Clemson has a losing record in. They've won. They've got a long win streak in a row. I think 9 in a row going back to 2015 or something like that. But Georgia Tech is 50-36-2 all time against Clemson. So it's one of the few ACC teams that Clemson actually has a losing record against. But and these two teams have played some crazy games, in the past, particularly before Dabo got there, going back to the Tommy Bowden years when Georgia Tech had a string, I think, of 5 straight wins over Clemson. And man, they just won those games in some crazy ways. The Calvin Johnson's big game, the phantom holding call on Thomas Austin. There's been a lot of crazy things that happen in these games, particularly when they're played in Atlanta. Clemson's not played at Georgia Tech since 2020, but that was the COVID season. I think you might have to go back to the Deshaun Watson days maybe to find the last time. Don't hold me to that, but they have not played much here recently.
Am I mistaken, or did Deshaun Watson get hurt his first season against Georgia Tech?
Tore ACL, and Clemson was up. Cole Stout comes in, throws 2 pick sixes, and Clemson loses. See, that's what I'm talking about, one of those crazy games. and he ended up missing the next week and then came back and played on the torn ACL against South Carolina.
Yeah, so this Georgia Tech bunch, they played out at Colorado in week 1, and they only won by a touchdown the last 90 seconds. And Haynes King was, kind of like what we saw this past Saturday night with Oklahoma and John Mateer, kind of like a one-man show as passer and runner and the main runner. And he's a guy that's been around college football forever. And Georgia Tech had kind of a layup against Gardner-Webb this past week. But if anybody, most people asked across the conference in the preseason after the obvious, Clemson, Miami, and some SMU talk about a dark horse, it's been Georgia Tech. A lot of people like Georgia Tech making some noise this year.
Print Keys absolutely got that program headed, in the right direction. They're on a, very sharp upward trajectory. They made a lot of noise on the recruiting trail, but man, that team just I got to watch a good bit of the Colorado game, and that team just plays physical. Haynes King's just he's a baller. He can beat you with his legs. That's probably what he tries to do first and foremost. But as we saw last week, they got a guy they can bring off the bench that can sling it around too. So now you're having to prepare for 2 quarterbacks. So that Dabo Swinney was very complimentary of those guys today. So was Nick Eason. Just talked about how physical they were. And Clemson's offensive line has not been very physical the first 2 games. I think the defensive front's been okay for the most part. But that offensive line, I just don't know how they're going to match up, man. I just don't know that they can flip the switch.
Yeah, so Georgia Tech taking on Clemson. Games at noon Eastern, and that game's in Atlanta. And again, Haynes King and Clemson taking on should be an interesting one. Should be an interesting one. I don't know what the point spread is on this, but I would guess it was like 10 or 12.
It opened way back at 9.5, and then once it got reset on Sunday, it was 6.5 when I looked at it, and I think it's down to like 3.5 or 4.
3.5 or 4.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And you know what? I was wrong earlier. Clemson did play at Georgia Tech in 2018, so let me correct myself there. But I think it's down to 3.5 or 4. And if you look at the ESPN FPI and the matchup predictor, I think Georgia Tech has like a 59% chance of winning. That's how bad
at it right now. Yeah,
that's how bad Clemson's offense has played over the first 2 games. I'm telling you, just Cade Klubnik, he looks like the guy we saw during his first season as the full-time starter when he was a sophomore. You know how he would not hang in the pocket, just looked flustered and like the game was too fast for him. He looked like that most of the night against LSU. He looked like that for a half against Troy, just missing some open guys, not even looking at his hot routes, running out of the pocket to his right when he doesn't need to, when he needs to be stepping up into it. I mean, it's been a lot of bad through the first 2 games. Again, they maybe they found something in that second half against Troy. We'll see, because they kind of scored they scored the last 27 points. But again, it's Troy, and I'm not sure how good Troy is this year. They were trailing the Nichols, I think, going into the 4th quarter in their opener, FCS team. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions about this Clemson team right now. Everybody was worried about who was going to punt the ball. Heck, the punting's been fine, and it's the offense that's been kind of, the bugaboo here, man. It's a mystery because Dabo swears up and down, they look really good in practice. It's just not translating to the field for whatever reason.
And the passing offense issue, what makes it even stranger is we totally understand that there are veteran quarterbacks out there that are in a 3rd or 4th year, but they may be working with different receivers, with the transfer portal, with guys obviously moving on through graduation. But he should have excellent rapport with these 3 guys. They've been working together for a while, for college football, for a long time.
Absolutely. Now, Antonio Williams has been out since the 2nd series of the LSU game. But they've been working. He's been working with Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore since the App State 2nd game of last year. That offensive line returned 4 starters. One of them hasn't played yet, really, and they lost another one. He got dinged up in the LSU game and didn't play against Troy. But even their backup, those two guys' backups, have played a lot of football. That was one of the reasons why everybody was so high on Clemson, because they returned so much. It just hasn't really made a difference. They certainly don't look like a veteran-laden team. That's for sure. They haven't been able to run the ball. Again, Cade's not been seeing the field very well pre-snap or after the snap. He's not been reading, trusting what his eyes are telling him. He just looks like an underclassman again, or he has for 6 of the 8 quarters anyways. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what it is, because it's not just one thing. It's kind of spread out. They've been the victim of several drops, several against LSU. There's a lot of blame to go around here, but I think a big part of it is, for whatever reason, it starts and stops with your quarterback, and he's just not been very good for the most part so far.
All right, Jason Priester, catch his work at the Clemson Insider. Anything in particular people are going to find with your work this week, Jason?
We have some recruiting stuff, and most of what you're going to see on the site this week is going to be aimed at Georgia Tech and how bad that offense has looked the first 2 games. I think the latest story we put out is talking about how Clemson's offense has no identity, which I would fully agree with. But yeah, it'll be a lot of Georgia Tech stuff with some recruiting stuff scattered in.
Recruiting. Do you have any nuggets for us?
No, Clemson picked up a 2027 commitment last week from Harrison Luke, who is Matt Luke's son. He's a safety in the 27 class. Picked up several SEC offers over the summer after camping at those schools, Georgia, Ole Miss, maybe Auburn was one of them. Not really a huge surprise that he ended up at Clemson, but maybe the timing of the announcement, it just kind of came out of the blue one day last week. But man, they had a star-studded list at that LSU game. Guys like 5-star linebacker Caden Henderson, a 5-star in the 28 class who is a defensive lineman, Asher Gitto. They had a defensive lineman, Jaden Worth. There was a bunch of guys there for that game, and that's one you'd like to win in front of that kind of crowd. And not only did they not win, they didn't look very good in losing.
That is for sure, but it's on to the ACC, and it starts at Georgia Tech. And yes, I'm a bit surprised. 3.5 is the point spread in Atlanta. Wow.
Yeah, like I said a minute ago, man, this is a huge game for Clemson, because if you look at Georgia Tech's schedule, it's not all that difficult, and Clemson still has to go on the road and play Louisville after this. You don't want to get a game behind those guys and need for them to lose too, particularly with the way Miami started off. Florida State looks much improved. You drop this game here in Atlanta Saturday, you're in trouble, man, particularly for a team who everybody had pegged, or so many people had pegged, to be one of those programs that was going to compete for a national title this year. I never went that far. I thought I might have said it on here last time we talked, but I thought the hype train had kind of gone off the rails there a little bit right before the season started. But I 100% would have bet almost anything this team was a playoff team at the very least. But, man, they have looked anything but so far.
Well, Dabo's turned things around before, so that's why he's in place. That's why he's got the job.
He seemed pretty chipper today. I'll give him that. He was in a pretty good mood, so we'll see if that means anything.
Very nice. All right, Jason, we appreciate you stopping by as always, sir. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure, my friend.